You are now listening to Sweep the Rack podcast featuring Brooklyn Rob and Big Mike.
Rob, what's good, homie?
Yo, man, special episode, some special content tonight, Mike. We have look, we consider ourselves the people's podcast. We're for the people, by the people, for the people.
Podcast of the people.
Podcast of the people. I think there's an interesting story we have for the viewers tonight in regards to Bowlero and Sometimes, Mike, as competitive bowlers and high-level bowlers that we are and our fans, we don't really get a chance to talk to a lot of the, beginner bowlers, right? Or the guys who have only been bowling for a year or two. And since Bowlero takeover, I'm sure, there's been a lot of other stories that we're about to share with the people that could be relatable to Adam's story. But, we want to kind of share what's going on, like, out there, like in the Bowlero centers. We want to bring an interesting story, interesting content to the people and let everybody decide on, like, I would be curious to see if other people have had this kind of same experience dealing with Bowlero, Mike. And I know you'll go into some of the details, but that's kind of where we're at, right?
Yeah. And we also talk a lot about Bowlero here in terms of the customer service experience that we have there, right? I bowl in a Bowlero center. I talk about that a lot, and to put it plainly, the customer service experience there, from my perspective, from the league bowler's perspective, leaves a little bit to be desired. But tonight we got contacted by a guy named Adam Shulkin, and we're going to bring him on in a minute here. And Rob, he has had a really terrible experience with Bowlero in terms of their customer service. So he reached out to us, and we've had some conversations with him off the air. And we want to let everybody know he did provide us with some emails and things of that nature to kind of verify some of the things that we talked about, or that he told us about his experience. So we wanted to bring him on, and we wanted to have him kind of give us the rundown of his experience and what happened here, and how things have gone, and how he's followed up with Bowlero. So Rob, let's bring him on and welcome him to Sweep the Rack. Adam, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Welcome to Sweep the Rack, my man.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so to start, I'm gonna briefly summarize up to a certain point, your experience that you and I discussed previously. So you were about 5 years ago. You were a relatively new bowler, and you were bowling on a regular basis at a privately owned center, and you had a group of people that were coming with you. This group started to grow, and the privately owned center approached you and said, "Hey, why don't you start a league? We can give you a better rate.
Back then it was an AM. I apologize. It was an AMF center.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So, was it privately owned though? Because some AMF centers were privately owned at that time, or was it an AMF corporate center?
It was an AMF corporate center.
Okay. So bowling in an AMF corporate center, the management there approaches you and says, "Hey, why don't you start a league? You can run the league. We'll teach you how to do it. We'll show you what you have to do, and you guys will get a better rate. You can grow it if you want. We can give out prizes, etc." Do I have it right so far?
Yes.
Okay. So eventually, that center gets purchased by Bowlero, right? We're all aware of that deal that went down. When that purchase happens, and when Bowlero took over, if I remember correctly, they made some changes in management to the center that you were bowling in, and pretty much in coinciding with those changes in management, things started to not run so well from your perspective in terms of a person running a league, where there were mistakes with the standings, there were mistakes with some of the clerical aspects of the league, and your concern was mainly that mistakes were going to be made that were going to lead to mistakes in prizes for people, and that was then going to fall on you as the representative who was running the league. And at that point, you reached out to Bowlero to try and rectify these issues. Do I have it correct up to this point?
Yes.
Okay. So again, if I'm remembering correctly, when you reached out to Bowlero, you ended up eventually dealing with one of their high-level executives, right? And
Correct.
your experience there started out very negatively. So why don't we kind of start there and let you take over?
So at that point in time, I reached out to the vice president of operations, Larry Ross, and I reached out to him because I had already been through the district manager, and the same issues were repeating themselves each week. So clearly, they weren't getting fixed. When I reached out to Larry, the very first comments I heard when he picked up the phone was, "Adam, you're more trouble than you're worth." And he literally just cursed at me and told me to lose his phone number, and he hung up. I couldn't believe the level of disrespect that I got at that time. So I honestly had no idea what to do. I had bowlers that were being affected by this. I had standings that were wrong. There was no support, clearly, all the way up to the top, in my opinion. I had bowlers that their league cards were not being honored. They were being turned away. There are certain things that I just can't do. I can't go into an office and do the things that need to be done inside the bowling alley. Those are things that, for lack of a better term, they just need to figure out how to do. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to be understanding and willing to work with people, but there comes a point in time where it's got to be done right. And it just didn't seem to be happening. So after that conversation with Larry, I tried reaching out to other people at the corporate level, and I was just dismissed, basically. I then actually started bowling.
Just to clarify, you were kind of taken aback by the way you were treated by him.
I couldn't believe the level of disrespect that came from any sort of someone in service. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, it was one of those things where your jaw pretty much just is. By the time your jaw comes back up, because you're speechless, you don't even know what to say. He's already hung up on you. So at that point in time, I tried reaching out to others in the organization. I got really no support, nothing. Eventually, and it happened to be that summer where I had actually started bowling in a privately owned center because I had moved my area for work. So I was actually, instead of in Baltimore County at the time, I was now in Crofton. So I actually started bowling in Crofton that summer. And I planned to at least go back to that center with a lot of the people that I knew, the AMF house back then, for the fall season. I received a letter over the summer telling me I had been banned. And if you put two and two together, it probably had to do with Larry Ross, would be my assumption. At that point in time, again, I'm happy in a privately owned house. I can tell you that Crofton is by far and wide the complete opposite. The term that's been used about AMF and Bowlero is politics. Everything's a battle. Nothing. They just don't give anything. Period. Service, nothing. It's just getting worse and worse.
Okay, so you get banned from the Bowlero Center, correct, right? And from your perspective, you getting banned was really the result of you bringing these concerns to Bowlero. Is that an accurate way to summarize how you feel about you getting banned? I
brought the concerns up, and I wasn't going to just let them yell and curse at me for bringing them up. I was going to continue to ask for support to get these things fixed, which I think is a very reasonable request to make at that time.
But again, you feel like you doing that is really what instituted them banning you.
Yeah, I think it has a strong. I'm sure it has. I'm sure there might be other things in their mind, but I would imagine that pretty much is what it came down to.
Okay, so now you get banned from Bowlero. Obviously, you don't go back and bowl at that center, as you mentioned. You're bowling at the privately owned center.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. A few years go by. Am I correct?
Correct.
And that Bowlero center or another Bowlero center that gets purchased in the area gets closed down, right? So between the previous league that you had been running and this new bowling center getting purchased by Bowlero and closed down, many bowlers are reaching out to you, as you put it to us?
I started getting calls about 3 years ago. They would usually come in towards the spring, the end of league season, which makes sense. Where bowlers were very upset with Bowlero, and they wanted to know if I could get them out into these privately owned centers. The amount of calls I got this past year after the purchase of Bowl America was pretty bad. I got 100 calls and texts from people that I know when they purchased Bowl America and they closed down the one in Glen Burnie. I got 100 calls and texts that night because they had told the center they were going to keep them. They were going to have a great league season. Literally the first week of league, they just shut it all down. And I was also told that they didn't even give the youth bowling balls that they collect each year for the youth bowlers. They told them it was property of Bowlero and wouldn't let them take it, is something else I was informed of, which I think is pretty petty in my opinion. But that's not either here nor there to my story. What eventually happened was about a year ago, because I'd been getting these calls for 3 years, I was trying to find someone, if anyone, that I could connect some of these bowlers to that I knew, because I didn't want them to have to drive an hour out my way, because that just seemed egregious for them to have to drive that far just to bowl in a happier environment. And about a year or so ago, I kind of ended up speaking with Collie Edison, who is the CEO of the Professional Bowlers Association, as well as Bowlero's chief customers, I believe, for their top customer service employee. And for the last year, when people reached out to me, I had been giving them her contact information, saying, I've been in contact with this person. Try reaching out to them, see if we can try to mend some of these issues. Did I ever want to bowl in their centers again? No, I'll be honest with you, not after the experience I had, but it's the caring person in me. I wanted to see if there was anything I could do to keep others that I knew from driving that far. I'm already in the area, so it's not a long drive for me, but for them, it's a pretty long drive.
And why do you think a lot of these bowlers chose to reach out to you?
I knew a lot of, bowlers are a pretty close-knit community, as I'm sure you're aware. The longer you bowl, the more contacts you grow. So, a lot of people that I knew back then were, started reaching out to me or telling others about the story. So it kind of became, I guess in a way, a game of telephone.
You became the guy who got banned from Bowlero for complaining. Is that fair to say?
In a way, yeah.
Okay, so then, I mean, that does make somewhat sense to me. Like, if somebody told me in my area, oh, well, like, did you hear about the guy who got banned for complaining to Bowlero? I'd be like, no. And if I really wanted to complain, yeah, I guess you would be a decent person to contact since you're already doing it with them and you're already banned. So, really, what are they going to do if you continue to reach out?
And that was my mindset when I thought about helping. But I mean, really, at this point, what are they going to do? Ban me?
Yeah, the only thing I don't understand about it is that, if I were you, I certainly wouldn't want to see any business or, see as little business remain with their centers as I possibly could. So, like, to be trying to work out issues on behalf of the bowlers with Bowlero who ban you, I just would have told these bowlers, listen, my advice to you is to find a privately owned center to bowl in. And I know there's, like we discussed, that there's not really many privately owned centers in the area
in our
that we're
state.
discussing.
They'd have to drive. Yeah, so they'd have to drive a lengthy distance, and I'm in the state of Maryland. It would be a lot to ask a lot of them to travel that far, although some of them are doing it now because they're just they just don't want to be there anymore. But again,
Adam, sorry to cut you off. I have a question.
Yeah,
so
sure.
You've been reaching out to Coley, and you said were you ever able to actually get in touch with her? Did you have conversations with her? Like, what was that?
I had a conversation with Collie I think it was last summer or early fall. And basically where I left the conversation with Collie is, even if you were to allow me to come back in your centers, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing it. What I'd like to do is when people reach out to me, I would like to give you a chance to talk with them and see if any of these relationships can be mended, is really where I left it with her. And then I said, all I ask in return is that I'll send you an email saying, hey, somebody's reached out to me. Do you mind if I pass your contact info along to them? And all I ask in return is that you respond to that email. For the last year, she did that. And then all of a sudden, this Bowl America purchase occurred, and they shut down that center and clearly aggravated a lot of people in this region. And that's when she dropped off the face of the earth on me, and I wasn't able to reach her for a lengthy period of time. And then all of a sudden, I received a letter from Bowlero threatening me with harassment charges.
And reminding you, because Rob and I have seen that email. Not only did the letter mention harassment charges, I believe in the state of New York where Bowlero is based, but it also reminded you that you were banned from their centers,
which was kind of pointless because I've been banned for 5 years, so I don't really see why that's relevant. But
right. And to your knowledge, that correspondence was sent from somebody involved with Bowlero's legal team. Am I correct?
It was. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I know that after you lost this contact with Coley, you continued to try and reach out to various people in Bowlero's organization, right? Even though you weren't hearing back from Coley, you were still trying to help these people out, help these bowlers out, bring these issues to Bowlero's attention, being
Correct.
that you were already banned and there was no risk for you to do this. And if I'm correct, and if I'm not, let me know. But from my understanding of looking at the emails, it seems that everybody was kind of playing hot potato with you. Like you would get in touch with one person and have an email chain with them, and they would kind of pass you off to someone else. And then you'd get to a certain point with them, and they would pass you to another person. And it never seemed like there was much follow through on their end, regardless of who you were reaching out to or who you were in contact with.
I don't even know that I could use the term hot potato. And the reason I say that is because I don't really, when you think about it, that would imply that you got a response from someone. I got a response from Collie Edison's, I believe it's her public relations person, Jill Loffer. And that was the beginning of this. And all she said is, I received your messages. I passed it along to Collie, who's on vacation. She'll be back next week. Tried reaching out to Jill again. I didn't get anything. Well,
clearly they don't want to deal with you.
Clearly they've, for whatever reason, they've decided that whatever communication was going on with me and Collie, they've decided that they don't care. And that's why I'm now here.
Okay, yeah, so, I was going to say, and just let me interject real quick, yeah. Rob. I was going to say, I'll be honest. When I talked to you before, and again, talking to you now on the show here, I really think that's what this story boils down to. Is that it's a pretty vivid example of Bowlero, not handling customer service well, and then not being very receptive to the feedback on the customer service side. Rob, what did you want to follow up with?
Yeah, so my follow-up is, okay, so you're on the show now, Adam, right? Like what is your, I guess, like your mission or your goal? Because you sound pretty determined, right? You sound like a determined person.
Well,
don't tell us it's to help the bowlers or whatever. Because if you tell me that now, come on, what.
There's still a part of me that wants them to be in a better environment, but at the same time, I think I'm now realizing that Bowlero is clearly not that environment, and if they want to leave, then at this point, I'm with you. More power to them, because clearly I can't do anything to change them. I will say that I do think that if you're asking me what hope would come from this, something positive. I would hope that we could get some level of message to Bowlero so that we can get them to start listening to people. If that means that they're willing to talk to me, that's great. If it's done in another form, that's also great. Although I don't know how we would know it if it was done in a different way. But bottom line is, watching this company, it just seems like it's the traditional sense of a large corporation that it's just, it lacks, like you said, it just lacks service. It lacks people skills. When I was brought into, as I shared with you, Mike, over the phone, when I was brought into bowling, there was a district manager at the time who was one of the things that he once said to me is, you've got two different types of bowlers. The new bowler needs to be nurtured so they'll want to continue. The seasoned bowler for the most part, is just like any other person. They just want to be heard. You can usually find mutual ground. And yeah, sure,
Right.
sometimes there are people that just nothing's going to be good enough. I work in, I work with the public, so I do know that. But
I guess hearing this story for the first time, I know Mike has talked to you. I read the emails, I went through a lot of it, and I'm just listening to the story for the first time as a first-time listener. My question to you would be is, when we reach out to Bowlero, and if we do get into contact with Bowlero, because we've been in contact with Bowlero before on previous, just
We
other
used to work
bowling
for them.
issues.
We used to work for them in full
to a certain
disclosure.
degree, right? To like a third degree
for a couple weeks until
that didn't last.
until they told us we couldn't say certain things, and then we had to bounce.
So,
but
my question is like you mentioned this Larry, just the Larry guy. He didn't like you for a certain reason. He answered the phone. What do you think? And you said this in your previous first 10 minutes. Like, if we ask them why they banned you, they're gonna have their own reasons. What do you think their reasons were for banning you from the get-go? Because that's kind of a gray area to me. I kind of feel like you maybe did something to them that you're not sharing here.
So that's a hard question to answer, and the reason I say that is because I never got a clear answer on that. The person who wrote the letter to me back then was Rick Chung, their legal staff member, and I spoke with him, and all he said was, this is not due process. When we decide to ban someone, we talk to various people in our organization, we investigate, and decisions are made. It's not due process was the term he used. So to answer that question, I'm like, I don't know how to answer it because I was never given. I will tell you that a league officer from one of the fall leagues wrote a letter on my behalf stating that he spoke to other people in the fall league, and none of the officers had ever heard any complaints about me. He went on to say that there were, minor things they had to deal with in the league, as any league would have, but none of them involved me. So I don't know how to answer that question because I never got an answer.
Well, maybe they'll get an answer. Maybe when we reach out, because we're going to reach out to Bowlero to see if we can get some kind of back.
I mean, I kept pushing because they were messing things up. I'm sure that maybe they didn't like that, but I had bowlers to answer to.
You were being a pain in the ass. You were being a pain in the ass. That's what
I had bowlers to answer to. I mean, what was I going to tell them?
You were being a pain in the ass, and they didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of get the gist of it. Okay, so yeah.
But how was I going to have bowlers if I couldn't stand up for them in these situations?
Yeah, very, very, very true. So the question to me then, right at the end of this interview, because we'll wrap it up in a few minutes here, but the question to me really becomes for Adam comes on the show, he reaches out to us, Rob, and are there other people out there who have experiences, this negative,
right?
With being banned, with having members of Bowlero, Tim Buck
type experience.
Oh my God,
we just got banned, so
I reached out to. I don't know if you saw the email. I reached out, and I was like, the timing of this is pretty ironic.
Yeah,
well, they don't have anything to do with that board.
Bowlero should hire Tim Buck. He would fit in perfectly there. He would fit in perfectly. He'd ban everybody. He could stand at the door and just randomly ban people. So, no, we joke, but in all seriousness, that's what I'm asking myself as we wrap up this interview. Are there other people out there who have these similar experiences that are this negative? I mean, Rob, you and I know that there's people out there who have negative experiences with Bowlero customer service. I mean,
but not like this.
Not like this. You're right. Like our examples
we
that we usually talk about are normally on the pettier end, I will say.
Right, like you bowling league every week.
Yeah. And there being oil on the approach, or them running the sports shop practice session when it's global.
For somebody who's running a league to go to Bowlero to get league issues addressed and have that kind of experience and that kind of emails, to me, there's something off here, right? Like there's something that doesn't add up, right? Like I'm trying to put 2 and 2 together in my head, and something does not add up because, look, I've been in the customer service industry since I was 18, right? I'm a customer service success manager. That's what I do for a huge company. and I get problems come to me all the time. And I'm not going to address it how Bowlero addresses it, right? I'm going to be open, communicative. I'm going to try to solve the issues. I'm going to try to work together so that Adam has his business back in my center and he spends money and his leagues are spending money. For him to call them and tell them to fuck off, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but do you think that Bowlero really cares that much?
Well, that's my
question here.
We don't know. That's the thing. It doesn't sound that way.
You would assume that they do, but honestly, Rob, off of some of the things that we've talked about in the past and some of the other stories that we've heard along the way of doing this podcast, I'm not so sure that has always been the case, right? So, again, we're going to reach out to Bowlero. We're going to give them a chance to respond. So.
Yeah, and Mike, I think you're hitting the nose right on the head there with that statement. I think part of the problem is it's like they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. They're saying publicly they are going to care about this, but then it's just not happening.
Well, and Rob, I would love to hear your thoughts on this too, and then we'll wrap it up. But it's also interesting to me that in this area that Adam's talking about, and I'm a little bit familiar with the Maryland area. Rob, you and I bowled down there a little bit for JVTs and things, right? Yeah. So Country Club, right, was the main place we would go to down there.
Oh, that was the most recent one. They just shut down. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we're a little bit familiar with the area down there, and if what Adam is saying is true about a large area of that area only having access to Bowlero centers. Rob, you and I have talked on the podcast about Bowlero going public soon and, their statement about how they're trying to leverage their position in the bowling industry. And they put out numbers about the number of Bowlero centers versus independent centers. And, when we read that stuff, you and I kind of got the impression that, hey, it seems like Bowlero is trying to become the only game in town on a large basis, right?
100%. And, they look, okay. The numbers speak for themselves. They own 323 centers in the country, 8 times more than the second company that owns bowling centers in the U.S. Right?
Correct, and that's what makes it hard to solve this. They keep buying everything, right? So they're not going to care.
So my point, right? And my point is, hold on, is like this situation with there only being these Bowlero centers in this large area. Is it that's kind of a microcosm of what we talk about as a bigger issue,
right? Let's call it monopoly.
Yeah. What I'm looking at this situation is well, what then happens if Bowlero becomes the only game in town in many places? Is something like this kind of customer service or this lack of attentiveness to customer service going to become the norm in their centers? You would hope not. You would think not, like you said. And again, we're going to give them the opportunity to reach out to us and respond. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's another thing that I'm asking myself here in terms of the situation. But all right, Adam, listen, man, we appreciate you coming on. I think you have an interesting story to tell. Anyway, you've had an interesting experience, and we appreciate it. We appreciate hearing from you. I don't know if we'll be able to give you what you want through this experience, but I could definitely say that I won't be surprised if people reach out to us if they've had similar experiences, Rob. We do get a lot of people reaching out to us in email, et cetera. So we'll see about that. We will reach out to Bowlero and see if we get a response from them. But Adam, listen, man, kudos to you for joining the bowling community and getting a league started. It didn't work out at Bowlero, but I'm glad to hear that, generally you're still bowling and doing your thing and you're able to enjoy the game still.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that. And Rob, by the way, you said you work in service. I'm a department manager for a very large. If you're in Jersey, I believe Wegmans.
No, he's in Arizona.
He is. Oh well,
I'm in Jersey.
In
Jersey.
Yeah, so I do understand dealing with the public, and I agree with you. The way that I would view it is, how can we find a way to work together to solve problems?
Right.
Yeah, but the companies you guys work for aren't the only game in town in a lot of instances. So
unless you're in Rochester, then we are. But
Okay. All right.
But yeah, no, it just comes down to, like you said, Rob. Let's work together and find a way to solve problems. And that's part of the reason why I tried.
Yeah, it just took literally someone had to just spend 10 minutes with you and try to figure out the issues. And in all this time that you spent in them spending about not responding to you could have been resolved in 10 minutes, really.
Yeah, true,
So
no doubt.
that's how I look at it. But Adam, we
I don't
appreciate it, man.
disagree.
We appreciate it seriously, and
Yeah.
good luck. Keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah, and
And
help
we'll,
us help. We'll help you spread the word about these issues. You help us spread the word on Sweep the Rack. All right.
Yeah, I didn't even know about you till Jeff told me, so I definitely will.
There you go. All
No
right,
doubt.
we appreciate it.
All right,
So,
Adam, take it easy, man.
All right, thank you guys.
All right, so final thoughts there, Rob. I mean, I think we covered most of it with him here.
yeah, just quick is the fact where he mentioned about Bowlero closing centers down. And remember when they put out that press release, and when if you want to listen back to that show, my first question was they're talking about all the centers they opened, but how many centers closed that they didn't talk about? And to me, that's interesting. And I bet you our viewers in those areas all across the country where Bowlero has actually acquired centers and then shut them down, it's a concern. Is it next year? Are they going to own 20 times more centers than is it going to be 50 times more in 5 years? Is this what we're looking at for the future of bowling? Is it every center going to be a Bowlero center? As a guy who grew up in Brooklyn and grew up in an area with a lot of small mom pop shop businesses, those small mom pop shop businesses are, to me, some of the best businesses you could ever support. Their product is better. Some of the, think about those little pizza places or the little like cafes and stuff, and bowling centers were the same way. The bowling center that, we used to go with, one guy owned it and he was there every day.
Yeah, but I don't. Those, like as you know, those
what
places.
I mean, though, right?
I do. I 100% understand the point you're making. I just think those places it's tough. In the bowling industry, those mom and pop places, it's tougher and tougher to compete these days, especially with the Bowlero centers because of the overhead and the money involved in the upkeep of the center and keeping it looking modern and looking good.
Mike, it reminds me of the movie Dodgeball, when you have average Joes and then you have Global Jim move across the street. Yeah. You know what I mean? And the Global Jim has all the money and the flair and the stock, right? And here average Joe's is just some guy trying to keep a gym open. Dude, it's the same thing with the Bowlero centers. You got this mom pop shop bowling center trying to keep business, and then you got Bowlero moving in with all their flashy lights and their surface, they look great. But then when you have someone like Adam who reaches out for a problem, like you can't even get in a simple league or 5 or 10 issues, whatever it was, minor issues fixed. So I'd be curious to see if Bowlero responds to us. I know they've responded to us before, so I'd be curious to see what their thoughts are when we do reach out to them. And of course, when they do, we'll let Adam know what those thoughts were, and we'll probably, when we air this episode or when we bring it out to the public, hopefully we could have both sides of it. But man, interesting. I'm curious to see, like what you said, how many people do reach out to us with the same kind of experience that Adam had. We reached out to Bowlero after this interview, and the email was more to Bowlero like, hey, we just want to get your side of the story here because there were some things that Adam was saying or emailing that kind of didn't add up a little bit on at least my point of view on his story. And I wanted to get Bowlero's feedback, and we reached out and Bowlero gave us a comment to respond to Adam's critique of Bowlero, because I told Bowlero that, look, his story, we're going to share it on our platform, and it does not put Bowlero in the best spotlight, right, when it comes to customer service, when it comes to a lot of things, right? So like helping league bowlers, and then so Bowlero reached out, and then this was Bowlero's response. In 2017, we notified Mr. Shulkin he would be denied access to our bowling centers due in part to his conduct and communication with others. Our actions were taken to ensure our bowling centers remain a safe and enjoyable place of entertainment for our guests and staff. For the past 4 years since then, Mr. Shulkin has attempted to reach out to us nearly 100 times. We in turn have responded to Mr. Shulkin. At this juncture, we hold steadfast in our decision to restrict Mr. Shulkin's access in order to protect the interests of our guests and staff. We have instructed Mr. Shulkin to cease further communication with us, and we reserve all our rights under law to address this matter as the need arises. Thank you.
I hope we don't get banned from Bowlero for doing this interview, because that'll be a problem for me. I won't be able to bowl league anymore.
I mean, look, like you're just gonna have to find a mom pop shop bowling center to go bowl at.
Yeah, there's plenty around. There's plenty
But
around.
hey, man, it'd be man. I can't wait to publish that letter of them banning you on
Oh my
podcast.
goodness, you're wild. All right, Rob. Extra content for the people. We're out. Take it easy.
Yes,
Catch us
sir.
on Wednesdays,
Later,
8 p.m. 8 p.m. Follow us on Twitter at BrokenRob11. I'm at the 215th. We'll see you guys on Wednesdays, 8 p.m. Take it easy.
Later, guys.
You are now listening to Sweep the Rack podcast featuring Brooklyn Rob and Big Mike.